This is a show about the ferocious pursuit of incremental growth from the inside out. And it's also a show about whatever else I feel like talking about, no matter how random, irrelevant, or confusing the subject might be. You are listening to the Emotionally Excellent Man Show, and I'm your host, Jason McKenzie. All right, before we saddle up, I want to tell you about the Dad Edge Alliance, which is my absolute favorite community on the whole entire internet. It's a group of, at the time of my recording, it's about 250 guys. It's growing all the time, but it is a community unlike anything I've ever seen. And I don't know if you could hear that thunder that just happened, but that is a sign that what I'm saying is truly, truly important. That's right. Thunder. Thunder happened when I'm talking about the Dad Edge Alliance. So listen, if you're a guy and you are feeling like your friendships or your relationships are superficial, you get around, you shoot the shit, but you're never going deeper. You don't feel safe to do that. And you know that there's something more. I'm telling you, join this community. It is insanely life-changing. Okay. Like we got guys in there from all walks of life. But they all have one thing in common. They're trying to elevate fatherhood by improving themselves. They're leaning in. They're supporting each other. They're learning from one another. They're learning about themselves. They're challenging themselves. They're setting goals. They're holding each other accountable. But they are all doing it in a place that's totally safe and totally just overflowing with bro love. And I'm trying to say that in a manly way. Bro love, right? So, one of the things that I've learned throughout my own personal development journey, which is a journey that will last the rest of my life, obviously, is that the people you surround yourself with that's one of the most important choices you can make. Many of you have probably heard the quote, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And when I first heard that, logically, I got it. Okay, that makes sense. But I never could have imagined what it actually meant. How transformative it is to get a better, higher caliber, more open, loving, caring, relentless group of men in your life. So that's what this fucking community provides. I mean, I don't know how to state it in a way that really truly conveys how I feel about it. Maybe I'll just say fuck a lot more. But I mean, the stuff that goes on here is crazy. They've got community calls. They've got accountability teams. They've got amazing content, free books. We're building courses. We have experts come in, New York Times bestselling authors, Navy SEALs to speak to the guys. And the guys are learning and they're growing and they're building relationships with one another and they're bringing a better version of themselves into every aspect of their life. So please think about it. Look around you. Do you have the group of people around you that are going to help you create the fucking life you want? Most people don't. Most people don't even know there's an alternative. And most people don't even understand how important it is. So I'm telling you from my own personal experience and witnessing hundreds of people have the same experience, it changes everything. Okay, so listen, if you want to know more, you can either always send me a message or you can go to gooddadproject.com/alliance and I'll put that link in the show notes page. Do it. And it will help you become emotionally fucking excellent. Now on to the show. Hello, everybody, you emotionally excellent people. This episode today is one that's really fun for me because it's me having met an amazing person in real life, in the flesh, as it were, and then building a relationship, having some amazing conversations, and then inviting him on the show so we can carry those amazing conversations over to a different medium and to deliver them to you in a way that adds fucking value to your life. So there you go. In April, you guys have probably heard me talk, I think, about the L.E.A.F training, which is leading by Experiential and Appreciative Facilitation, or leading with Experiential and Appreciative Facilitation. And it really is a way, it's training to certify me and obviously the other people that take it to facilitate large-scale human change through the use of appreciative inquiry and a bunch of other tools. I'm going to have we're going to be doing some podcasts on appreciative inquiry because it is absolutely just too powerful and too positive and too important a methodology not for me to share. And I love it so much. I'm using it everywhere. We're using it in our masterminds. We're using it in our at work, professionally, designing sessions for groups and organizations to help them facilitate change, but facilitate change in a way that finds the best of what was, the best of what is, and the best of what could be. So it's really getting people together, whole systems, like whole human systems, getting them together and really exploring, the best of the past, the best of right now, what we want to keep moving into the future, no matter how much we change and evolve. And then freaking co-creating an amazing future together in a way that's powerful and everybody has a stake in, right? And there's so much more to it than that. And that's why maybe I'll get John Berghoff, who is my mentor and teacher, to come on the podcast if he's willing and talk to you about appreciative inquiry, because it's just changed my life, but it's also given me an entirely different set of tools to help other people change theirs, and I love talking about it. So what does that have to do with my guest today? Well, when I was in Cleveland in April, that happens to be where I met him. So Jesse Harless had just gone through I think he had gone through this previous certification and he had chosen to come back as a learning partner. So in other words, when you go through the certification, you can come back the next one and you can actually, for the next class, you can kind of help them, right? Help them, guide them through some things, be there, teach, lead, all that kind of stuff. And so actually I'm going to do that with the class in October, which I'm exceptionally excited about. So I got talking. What ended up happening was Jesse got up and gave a presentation at the beginning, not the beginning, but during the certification, where he talked about how he is using appreciative inquiry with men in recovery. So, men in a treatment center, like in an inpatient treatment center, and Jesse's using appreciative inquiry to help them with the recovery. And to listen to him describe it up there was so powerful, because a lot of these guys have been hurt. They're hurting, right? They've maybe made some choices that have had some pretty serious impacts. They're recovering from addictions. As somebody who's been maybe not to the point where I needed to be in an in-treatment, but who is recovering, I know what it's like. I know what it was like for me anyways. And what Jesse's doing, listening to him talk up there, in front of the audience, in front of the room rather, was so powerful, because it just showed me that pretty much there's an opportunity to use these tools to help in just really an infinite number of applications to help people imagine something different, right? And so then we got talking about it. We went for lunch and got talking, and it was amazing. And I just needed to know this guy more. And what ended up happening at some point during the week we were there, Jesse was talking about how he was bullied, and that really prompted me to stand up and say, "Man, when I was in high school, I was a bully too." And we ended up hugging in front of everybody in the room, and it was for me extremely therapeutic and healing, and I think it was for Jesse too. And it's just one of those places when you're in a room with that kind of magic and that kind of energy. It's absolutely beautiful what you can see happen. So, anyways, Jesse comes on the show, and we don't dig in too much to his past, but he's got an incredible story of addiction and felony conviction and all that kind of stuff. But we really talk more about Jesse now and where Jesse wants to go in the future and how he's helping people. So you're going to love this conversation, because this guy's as real as it gets, man. He's just a regular dude trying to make a difference. And he's one of the ways he's doing it is by surrounding himself with awesome people, learning new skills and applying them with the understanding that you're never going to be perfect, that you need to just try, learn, apply, learn. That's really the never-ending pattern, right? Jesse's a beautiful example of that. So, he's a dude in long-term recovery, but but he's also an entrepreneur. He's a certified life coach, speaker, author, and facilitator. He holds a master's degree in mental health counseling from Rivier University. I don't think I knew that, actually. And he's certified in leading with experiential appreciative facilitation, as I was talking about earlier. He's the founder of Entrepreneurs in Recovery, a movement to help people in addiction recovery reach their full potential. And he works with several treatment centers and programs in New Hampshire, where he facilitates groups using the power of appreciative inquiry. And on top of all that, if you haven't gotten that by now, he's a fucking awesome human being. And I feel really fortunate to have met him. And I'm really grateful that we got the chance to have this conversation. So Jesse, I don't know if I'm going to see you in October, man, back at the next, when I finish up my certification, but I hope that I do. And obviously I wish you all the best, man. You are changing the world, and you inspired me to really think more broadly about how what we're learning can be applied towards the betterment of the world, of humanity, of the world in general. And you're a hero to me, brother. So keep doing the great work. And thank you so much for coming on the show. Hey, Jesse, welcome to the Emotionally Excellent Man Show. This is actually the first time I've said that introduction. So you hold a place of distinction for all time.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you for having me on your show, Jason.
All right, man. Hey, it's great to have you here. So, hey, you wrote in, I was watching a movie with my kids the other day, actually. I was thinking of you because it was some horrible teenage movie that, I watched with my kids sometimes. And they were in Hollywood. And I know you just got back from Hollywood. So I was actually thinking about you. So what were you doing out there?
Yeah. So in Hollywood, I was invited to a retreat called the Light Hustler Retreat, which is it's a group Anna David started, and I believe that was their first ever retreat. So it was a bunch of people who are in recovery from addiction, and we got together to get to know each other, to network, to what did we do? We did a lot of just inner work, a lot of meditation, just lots of, it's really more of conversations and meditation and mindfulness than anything else. So it's really getting to know people who are out there doing things, who are in the addiction recovery space. So definitely walked away with a few new friends. So I was really excited to get out there.
That's interesting. So how do you find, one of the reasons I'm really fascinated in this idea of emotional excellence right now is because, I think we've talked about it too, but it's really, the idea of how it applies to, say, addiction and mental health and all that kind of stuff. So when you see, a group of people that are in recovery, say, and they're doing this type of inner work, like, I mean, what does that change for them? Or what does it change for you, I guess, as it relates to, recovery and moving forward and being able to sustain that recovery? Because I feel like sometimes people, when they don't do this type of work, they kind of can white knuckle it a lot, for the rest of their life. And I feel like the kind of work you're doing, that you're talking about, is super important. So I guess, how do you see it impacting people who are, former addicts or in recovery, or however you want to put it?
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about inner work, I think it's all about inner work. I mean, it's, if I don't change what's going on the inside, especially the conversation I'm having with myself, like my self-talk, nothing's really going to change. It only lasts for so long, where I'm able to, listen to the things on the outside, listen to my negative thoughts. And, I need to work on that. So I think the inner work, whether that's, working on your mindfulness or meditation, or getting involved in some type of, group, some type of recovery group, where you're learning more about yourself through, let's say, the steps, or you're learning through some type of practice. I think that's everything. I need to go on the inside for my strength, not the outside. So however you can get to that place. And, for me, I got to that place because I was, there was a lot of pressure for me. My addiction to opioids brought me to a place where I was facing federal felonies. So it was kind of like a big shock. I was kind of thrown into recovery, and I learned real fast, that I need to surround myself with new people, and those new people, like mentors and people in recovery who've already done it, they showed me the way. They showed me what was working for them. I paid attention, and I started to emulate that. And I still do that today. I still model people that are living their lives in a way they're living they're using these positive habits, and I still emulate that today in my own recovery.
Yeah, that's cool. So one of the things you mentioned there was the stories that we tell ourselves, and I find that this whole thing fascinating because I realize I guess as I develop more self awareness, or I just I don't know, I guess that's probably what it is, or thinking about this stuff more, man, like our minds just there's a nonstop narrative going on inside our own head, and I think that for me, I spent a lot of my life not I don't know if I was probably aware of it. I mean, obviously I was aware of it, but I didn't understand that it's possible to separate myself from the narrative in some way. And that's a challenge, but I find with myself, like, did I tell you about this story of what happened to me at the Appreciative Inquiry Summit we were at about when we were doing this exercise and me feeling insecure? Did I tell you about this?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So this is a good example. So I don't remember which one of the exercises we were doing, and we'll talk about the AI training, I'm sure, throughout this conversation. But just so for people have some context, I met Jesse at a training program that is basically a certification program for a type of facilitation that uses, positive, powerful questions. And regardless, it's just this room full of amazing people. And we're doing this exercise where we were putting Post-it notes on a whiteboard. And I don't remember what the purpose of the exercise was, but anyways, we're writing our thoughts down, sticking on the whiteboard. And I'm finding myself like really attached to my own ideas. Like I talked about this a little bit at the training, but I've thought about it since, and I realized what it was I really wanted people to pick my ideas, And so, and I'm comparing the ideas that other people are writing down with my own ideas and seeing if they're better. And I'm like, but even though that had nothing to do with anything, like it's not about being better. This is just a story that was going on inside of my head. And I realized afterwards, as I thought about it, that really what it was about was, me feeling a part of me feeling insecure about being around this caliber of human being, and feeling like if they picked my ideas that it would validate my being there, and that's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with thinking that. It's more like, but what do you do with it? Right. So for me, that was one of the first times I think that I can think of that I had like the self-awareness to understand what was happening what was happening in the moment, and not judging it or not trying to pretend I wasn't thinking it, because you can't really pretend that. So it was just a really insightful thing for me, and it made me understand that, like, God, I guess it helped drive home the point that we really have a nonstop barrage of verbal diarrhea going through our heads all the time, and we do have a significant amount of power to maybe not change it like in the moment, but at least to be able to reframe it in the moment, or to be able to take a step back and maybe observe it with interest instead of judgment.
Yeah, 100%. That conversation is happening whether you like it or not, and I think I think it's been labeled different things, right? I think it's your voice. We all have it, but I think there's a way to. I think it's been called like the watcher, where you can like watch your thoughts and not participate. And I think I know exactly what you're talking about. I think my conversation, if I'm not like doing certain practices to redirect that conversation on the daily, like every day, it's gonna always lean towards the negative. I find it's always gonna lean towards fear. I don't know why that is, but it always leans towards fear, like fear of missing out, fear of being less than, and I think that that's where it goes. And so it's not a positive conversation that naturally occurs. It's one of missing out in some way. And there's so many of those examples. I completely relate to that. And I actually probably had the same experience when I was there. I'm like, well, I remember because for your class, I had just graduated. So I was in your class as more of like a support. And I remember being in there and being like, well, I've already graduated, so I need to coach people and show them the way. And then I realized, like you, like the people in the room and the amount of talent and the amount of, just amazing amount of people that were there. I felt like, well, how am I going to do this? And then all of a sudden I started to doubt all the things I've done over the last 6 months in an instant second. And, it's just funny how that happens.
Yeah, no, and I think that's part of the journey, right? I mean, that's that I'm reading this book right now. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Emotional Agility, and the author Susan David just put out a TED talk, and it's incredible. But basically, it's about all of this kind of stuff. And she's a Harvard PhD, Harvard academic, and she talks in the book about all of these things, and how all of the emotions that we have, like there's 7 primary emotions, and 5 of those primary emotions are what we tend to in our society label as negative. So like fear, contempt, sadness, disgust, anger. Yeah, that's 5. So, and then the other 2 are kind of like, one is joy, which we label as positive, and surprise, which is, could go either way depending on what the surprise is, and how all of those emotions, those primary emotions, like they've evolved over millions of years to be part of us right now. So in other words, they serve some sort of very important purpose. But what we do is we always have this, we're always told to be positive, keep your chin up, think positive, whatever, like smile, and all of this stuff. And basically one of her premises in the book is that's bullshit, in the sense that these emotions serve a purpose. And the path to true happiness is not trying to run from these emotions, but experiencing them, observing them, reflecting on them, and learning from them, and ultimately moving through them. And as you do that, you take a different version of yourself, out the other side. Because if there's any certainty, it's that these emotions or feelings will pass. And that once you do that and you own them and you don't try to run from them, that's actually the path to true happiness. And I just find that so fascinating, because it gave me, I don't know, I feel like it gives me a little bit of freedom to just, experience things as they come, knowing that there's a reason from them. And it's kind of incumbent on me to figure out what that reason actually is if I want to live my best life.
Yeah.
That
I
was
love
kind of a monologue there.
yeah, I know. I love that. And it's true. Like, and that's, I think that's a common thing in addiction too, is, you feel a certain feeling and you want to numb it out. You don't like it. And I think feeling your feelings fully is not easy, but it's really important to feel that whatever it is that's coming up for you, to feel it fully. And maybe even ask yourself why you're feeling that. And then, and it also helps to have support, of course, so if you're going through that and you're feeling feelings that either you're for the first time because you're newly in recovery, or because maybe you're, it's just, they're just new feelings because you're growing, to be able to feel them fully and to share them, I think to trust, for me, I have certain people in my life, mostly men, men who are in recovery. But there's even a few women who I trust, who I can share that with. And, that's really powerful to be able to walk through that together, because once you share your vulnerability, it opens them up. It opens the door for them to share something, and then, something amazing happens.
Yeah. So that Susan David, that author, she talks about, one of the quotes she has that really connects with me is that discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life, right? So if we're talking about vulnerability or whatever, like, you got to get uncomfortable. You got to play at the edge of, sort of the edges of your that fine line between comfort and discomfort in order to grow. So, and I think you're a great example of that, in the sense that, I first, like, so we were at this certification program together, but I hadn't spoken to you yet before you got up and gave a presentation in front of the room. And it was powerful, to say the least. And we'll talk about this, but it was the work that you're doing in treatment homes using appreciative inquiry, which is the the methodology or philosophy that we're learning throughout this training program. But before we get into the details of that, talking about discomfort and talking about having to put yourself out there to grow. I mean, when I talked to you afterwards, you were kind of shitting your pants before you got up there and gave that presentation, weren't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, I I knew I was gonna. I wasn't expecting to present to your class. I knew that we had just done I just graduated from the training. So it's called L.E.A.F, Leading with Experiential Appreciative Facilitation training. And I had just presented to my own class and I felt comfortable. And then all of a sudden I was put on the spot instantly to present to your class. And that's when I was like, holy shit, like I didn't expect that. And yeah, so I guess that's the best way though, right? I just, then you speak more from your heart than your head. And yeah, so it was certainly a surprise.
Yeah, well, as an audience member, you couldn't tell, so you did a great job. But and also actually your talk about using appreciative inquiry in treatment centers is really something that triggered me to start thinking a lot about what I'm talking about now. Like literally, the idea of moving my podcast and stuff from mental health warriors to the emotionally to get fascinated with this idea of emotional excellence was actually one of the reasons was because of your presentation, because I've been feeling like just personally, like I'm kind of sick of talking about just mental health. I've been talking about it for a long time, and I mean, obviously it's very important. I'm not trying to say that. It's just that for me, as I grow as a person, it's my interests are changing and I'm changing, obviously. So, I was kind of, when I came to the training, like it was or to the L.E.A.F training program, it was not that I was in my head, like looking for some moment of inspiration or something. It was just that I had been thinking about mental health. Like, how could I do something different that maybe helps people dealing with mental health issues, but like also maybe helps a broader audience in some way? And I really didn't know what that was. And when you got up and you gave your presentation on using appreciative inquiry, which is really helping people think about things, ask really powerful questions about the best of what has been, to the best of the past, the best of right now, and like what could be, the best of what could be, imagining a vibrant future. Like, and you're talking about this with, addicts in recovery, and I'm thinking, wow, this stuff is powerful, right? Because appreciative to me, when I think of the idea of emotional excellence, I think of asking powerful questions as a critical component to being able to develop that. And so your presenting it really started me thinking about it in a really different way. So I'm super grateful for that, and I'm super grateful that I met you. But that's the power of getting uncomfortable, right? You got up there, you gave a presentation, you weren't expecting it, and then you impacted. I mean, obviously not just me, but I'm just speaking for myself. But a person in the audience, and you doing that changed the trajectory of my life forever. And that's kind of a big deal.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you. I didn't even know that. So thank you for sharing that. And it just goes to show, like, even knowing, doing that training and learning about appreciative inquiry, instead of me taking that and just going, well, this is good information, someday when I'm ready, I'm going to implement this to the people that I care about most. And instead I said, well, why don't I just implement it right away? And I think that's what kind of changed the trajectory of my life is, I just kind of went out there and took these ideas of, positive, it's really, positive questions and pulling the strengths out of people's stories and really tapping into the positive core. We all have a positive core. And so I said, let me bring this into places that I'm already in, and test this. And so I would go into just to explain it, a little background, go into let's say a sober living facility for men, and I would start with what we call the air cycle, and I would go in there and talk about, like, I'd pull out a high point story. So I could really choose any kind of question, but I chose the question, when was a time when you overcame an adversity, an obstacle, a challenge. And if you're in addiction recovery, you have overcome many obstacles and adversities and challenges. So, I just had them pull out one of those stories and then share them with a partner. And then we eventually found the strengths that are in that story, because there's obviously strengths that help you to overcome the adversity. And so from there, we pulled out the strengths, we shared them together, we found themes, and then we would then go into finding or having them each create a vision for their life. And I would do that through a visualization process. And they would have a vision, and then from there we would have an action plan and what they could take. And this was all done in 60 minutes. So I kind of crammed a lot into a 60-minute session. But by doing that, the result was that I would come back to these sober homes or treatment centers, and I would talk to these men, and they would tell me, "Oh yeah," I'd say, "How's everything going?" And 2 or 3 months later, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, no, I visualize all the time. I just got a new job. 3 things have just happened," and I was blown away by that. It wasn't by what I did. I just brought in, certain questions and a certain methodology so that they could use, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, I'd say, and it's funny because I feel like probably not the people listening to this show, although who knows, I'm sure there are people listening to this show who think that, but people have this, I think, this kind of visceral reaction or just maybe a default preconceived notion maybe of when we talk about things like visualizing the future and stuff. I know for me, for most of my life, I would have been like, okay, that sounds basically insane. And it sounds like psychobabble, but man, does it work? And there's research that shows why it works. And really what it's doing is I think that so often we feel like the older version of ourselves is a different person. It's hard for us to connect ourselves right now with the 80-year-old version of ourselves. But like when we do our mastermind groups, for example, one of the things we do is have the guys write their eulogy. And the idea behind it, and it was interesting because it's actually in this emotional agility book I was talking about too, is that there's research that shows, that this is effective and it actually works. But it's like the idea of creating a eulogy, makes you visualize, usually in a pretty like emotionally connected way. Like it's a pretty moving experience for people when they do it, because you really think through who the man you want to become is. And it creates this continuity between who we are right now in this moment and that 80-year-old, say, or whatever version of ourselves. And that connection and continuity is one of the key sort of anchor points, I guess you could say, that helps us, make more self-aware, intentional choices to move us, over time closer to becoming that person. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think it's the same thing. I mean, how many of these guys have ever in their life spent any time whatsoever imagining a future, that was vibrant and evocative and one that they really wanted to move towards?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's such a diverse group of men, or even women. If when I go into certain treatment centers, but there's so many people that are. It's such a diverse group. There's people who have been way more successful than I can ever imagine, and then of course addiction took them to get to this spot. So some of them actually are familiar with more books than I even have read, and have had very successful 7-figure businesses and lost it all. So it's interesting that the diversity in the room. And so I never assume anything because I've always been blown away by some of the people in the room. So yeah, but I mean, there's definitely, I would say the majority, and even for myself, I wasn't doing visualization on a regular basis until a few years ago, but I know after asking for feedback, and I would have them write down, what was the most impactful part of this process? And every single time, I would say 95% of the time, they would say it was the visualization. It was a visualization. It was a visualization. And it was so interesting that would be the most impactful part. But at the same time, like you said, they had probably never been exposed, most of them, to the visualization. And no one's ever allowed them to do that, to just freely use They're to tap into their inner resources to create a future. Everything is about one day at a time, which is very important. But no one ever says, well, what about 3 years from now? What about 5 years from now? And they just have never heard that language. And that's, to me, what gives people purpose. That's what gives you your purpose. It's like, well, what am I going to be doing in 3 years? Because it can change, because we evolve. I mean, I evolve all the time, but to have something to strive towards is really, really important, so that there's a purpose, and I think that's what happens when we do the visualization and create that dream, almost, you could call it.
So are most of the people that you are working with right now, are they in a sort of a 12-step program? I'm not too familiar actually with this, with the, sort of the addiction recovery space. I mean, are there like a breadth of, or a variety of different people you work with that are in different programs, or is it specifically focused around mostly people who are like in a 12-step type program? And are there different 12-step programs?
Yeah, this isn't so much a 12-step program. These are like addiction treatment centers. So, like, for instance, one would be a center that houses 35 men who are now, they're looking to live with other men who are trying to stay sober, and so they live in a house it's cheap housing, and there are rules to the house. You might have to attend meetings or whatnot, but they choose to live there, and they can live there for 6 months, a year, 2 years. And, that's a place like Bonfire Recovery Services here in Dover, New Hampshire. That's a place that offers that. And then, but there's also 28-day treatment centers too, right? So you have a 28-day treatment center, which has their own ways of providing care. And it could be through, of course, therapy, and they could have 12-step methodology there, but it's all different. Every place I go, some places, they don't require any of that, like go to meetings. It's just a group where provides housing for people who want to stay in recovery. So it's very diverse. Yeah.
Interesting. So what do you consider yourself, other than just an awesome human being? I mean, do you consider yourself an addict in recovery? And if you do, is that something that you like, how long do you, I don't know if label yourself the right word is, but you know what I mean? Like, how long, I guess, how do you think of yourself is probably the simplest way to ask the question.
I think of myself as a person in long-term recovery. I think
Okay.
of myself as an entrepreneur, a life coach, an author. I think of myself as all these different labels, because that's just a label. So if I was going to say, well, what am I in the recovery space? I'm a person in long-term recovery.
Okay. And so what does that mean exactly? And the reason I'm asking is because, like, I look at myself and I just think of it differently. So I think of myself as, you know, just a dude that overcame the problems I was drinking to avoid. Like, so I don't have, and I don't know, who knows, maybe this will bite me in the ass one day, but I just don't really think about it very often. So, and I'm not saying you walk around with this like sort of Damocles dangling over your head or whatever, but what is it like? What does long-term recovery mean? And is that like, do you ever move past that, or do you know? I guess is.
No, I don't think you ever move past it. I think what it means to me is I haven't found it necessary to use a substance, or just any substance, alcohol, drugs, in over 12 years. And that's by the grace of God, that's not going to change. That's something that's going to continue. So it's a long-term recovery. It means that I plan on staying sober for the rest of my life. And so that's how I look at it. Like, I can't use one of any substance. I can't take a hit of a joint. I can't have one pill. I can't have one drink. I've tested all that. I've experimented, and I know what happens when I do that. So that's, to me, is long-term recovery. So recovery in general, like if we're just going to kind of define recovery. So SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, defines recovery as a process of change in which an individual improves their health and wellness, lives self-directed lives, and strives to reach their full potential. And I love that definition, because if that is the definition, then that is why I'm doing the work I'm doing, because I believe that you can reach your full potential, and you can, it's important to improve your health and wellness. That's, as we know, like, health is wealth. So if you're not taking care of your health, it's affecting your mental and spiritual life. So that definition really resonates with me. And that was when I heard that definition, I had started what I'm doing, Entrepreneurs Recovery. I'm like, that's a perfect definition for what I'm doing, because I'm trying to help people to reach their full potential, because I believe we can. And so to me, that's recovery. So recovery is not just, oh my God, I'm barely making, I just got to stay away from the substance or whatever addiction that you have. It's way more than that. It's thriving. It's reaching your full potential. It's taking care of your health. It's living a self-directed life. And so that's how I look at recovery.
I love that. I've never heard that definition. I really, really love that. So maybe I am an addict in recovery in that case. Um, yeah, that's great. So when you say self-directed life, I mean, I've heard that term, but I haven't heard it really much. But I'd love to explore that a bit, because I think like it's interesting how some of the people I talk to, whether it's in the mental health warriors group or just in general, I mean, I talk to a ton of people, and I see, there's a pretty common pattern, I think, where um, in people who maybe are not, living the life that they want, um, and I see a lack of self direction, or living a not living a self directed life is manifesting itself in, you know, feeling more like a passenger rather than the pilot, say, and feeling like things are happening to them versus being the kinds of people that make things happen. And I mean, things are always going to happen to us. Obviously, life is complicated and messy, and you never know what's around the corner. But at the same time, you have an immense amount of power to control how you respond to whatever life happens to throw at you. So, when you think of self-directed life, like, what does that mean?
Well, when I think of self-directed, to me that means I have a plan, meaning like I have goals that I set. I have daily goals, and I have also, future goals. So I might have a quarterly goal, a 6 month goal, and a 1 year goal. In fact, I do have those goals, and I also have 5 year goals. And a lot of people say, well, I'm just living for today. Well, yeah, but if I want to live a self-directed life, then I need to help create or co-create that life so that I can live a life that is self-directed towards health and wellness, that is to reach my full potential. I can't do that by random chance. So I need to have a plan. And so, and again, plans change. But if I have a goal that I've set, and that I'm striving towards, I have a direction, and it's pulling me towards a certain vision that I have versus someone else's vision for me. For a long time, I listened to what the world was telling me, which was okay, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to work for 40 years at a job, you have to get 2 degrees, you have to do this, it's like that ended up not being true. And so I started to go, okay, I want to figure out my own path. And so I had to start, talking to people who are doing the same thing. And I also had to share these goals that I started to create with those people. And that's how I started living a self-directed life. It started for me with like goals, but there's more to the story, right? So to live a self-directed life, I have to be able to take care of myself. And so I have to put recovery first. So I have to focus on my recovery. And like that could mean different definitions for different people. But once I did that, that's when I could start to like map out and kind of design my future with goals. Is once I had my, I would say once I had my shit together, I could start to do that. But early on, it was just, man, today I just need to make it through the day. I just got to get to work. I got to hit my recovery meeting. I have to talk to my recovery friends or team, however you want to call it. Like that's how it started. And eventually it became, wow, like this is working. Like my life's improving. Now what? And I couldn't do the same thing. I had to be like, well, maybe I should set a goal to like maybe take a few courses. And then I did that. And then I'm like, maybe I should set a goal to get my bachelor's. And then I did that. So I started, those are the goals I'm talking about. And so that helped me to live a self-directed life. I think that's with most people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like that. And I think that like, I also, what I've been finding really interesting lately is the idea of like, values aligned activities, right? So what I've been trying to do every day is I know what my core values are. I've identified and my core values, and I've repeated themselves a million times. So what's interesting though is that I have goals too. But what I also have started doing is, identifying each day what are some choices I'm going to make to move myself closer to my values. And I think because goals are a way, sort of not necessarily maybe a quantifiable way, but a way of, realizing your values. So I think what they fall into is they set some goal, which is like, I want to lose X amount of pounds. And then they just try to white knuckle it out. They try to gut it out, and they don't spend any time thinking about, or maybe, I'm just generalizing here, but they don't spend, a lot of people don't spend enough time thinking about how would actually achieving that particular goal help you realize a specific value in your life, and why is that value important to you? Because when you start thinking about it that way, it's not about losing weight. It's about finding actionable ways to move yourself closer to those values and the life you want to live. And I think when you do that, man, I don't know, it feels easier. It feels easier to make those choices. So instead of like, actually, this is all from the book Emotion. I'm like basically regurgitating this book I've just read because I'm like so fascinated by it. But, so instead of saying I'm not going to eat the chocolate cake, it's like I'm going to make a food choice that is closer, that will help bring me more in alignment with my values. And so when you go to the fridge, you might still see the chocolate cake, but you'll see other options as well. And just the act of, putting yourself in a headspace where you see those other options reduces the chance that you're going to eat the chocolate cake, and improves the chances you're going to eat something healthy. So I think for me, I'm really trying to do that. And as I do that, it's interesting. I had like some of my core values is like discipline and confidence. And as I'm writing down, like, what am I going to do to move myself towards these values? I'm like, these aren't even values. I've been repeating these to myself for like, a year. And I don't, confidence, how's that a value? Like, because I can't think of why would I feel like if I'm living my values, just kind of having a certain level of confidence would be a byproduct of that. So it's interesting as I started to think of concrete ways every day to move myself closer to my values. I realized that all this stuff, some of the values I've been saying I hold dear are not even values I care about at all. So I don't know, just interesting journey there. But I do agree with you that, having the wherewithal to set goals and then understand that achieving them is a challenge, and it's a learning process, and that you don't always make choices that move you closer to those values. And then what do you do with that? So I guess maybe that's a question I have for you, is that when you make a choice, or because we're all human, that doesn't feel right, or doesn't move you closer to those goals, or what some people might label a screw up, like, how do you deal with that now?
Yeah, and I think that's really important, that the goal that I set is, it's almost not even about the goal. It's who I become in the process of achieving the goal.
Mm-hmm.
So when I set a goal, especially like a 1 year goal, like that is, I'm going to change quite a bit when I'm on the way to achieving that goal. So if I didn't have the goal, I wouldn't I wouldn't grow. But because I have the goal, I'm growing towards the goal, and that goal definitely can change, and you can pivot because we change as a person. When I first decided to leave my job and to pursue a business on my own, I set these goals, and I thought they were kind of like your values. I thought my goals were, well, I got to make money right away if I'm on my own. And so this is going to have to be the path. I'm going to have to jump into this course. And I invested all this money into these courses and into these different avenues. And none of them lined up with my values. None of them lined up with what I want to do. But it propelled me in a direction to find that out. If I never had the goal to begin with, I wouldn't have even known that that was the wrong choice. So I had to. So on the way towards the goal, I said, "Whoa, hold on! I need to pivot. Actually, I don't. That doesn't align with my values or my mission for my business. I'm going to pivot this." But I was already in motion because I had set that goal, and so I think it's totally fine to pivot and to have different, to change, because we continually change. And my goals, I wrote them out in the beginning of the year. If I was to bring them out right now and look at them, a lot of them I'm on track, and a lot of them I've achieved. But there's plenty that I look at and I go, oh, that's absurd. Like, that's not going to be part of what's going to happen this year, and that's okay. So I think it's not beating yourself up, when you don't when you're not achieving that exact goal. And I'm not talking about bowing out altogether, because you didn't hit the goal. I just mean we evolve and change, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, I know what I did, and I'm curious to know if you did this too before you started taking more of a bias towards action way of looking at it. But I would try to intellectualize everything, and I think this is pretty common. But I mean, for me, I would try to play everything out in my head, and then paralyze myself and never take any action. I think it's Mike Tyson had that quote, like everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And I think you really just need to get out of your head and try something because you're never, I don't think, anyways, at least in my experience, I wasn't able to formulate my purpose or, understand what the thing was the way that I thought I would be able to add some kind of value until I tried a whole bunch of different things. And it never stops changing. Like this whole idea about emotional excellence. That's like a month old that I've been thinking about that. But, there's been a million iterations, and through every part of it, I've learned and grown, but what I'm passionate about in the moment changes. So, I mean, are you finding that for yourself too? Cause I think I look at every step along the way as an important part of what got me here right now. And some of them, man, like I'm telling you, I wasted, like, I don't want to say wasted because it obviously wasn't a waste, but I spent a lot of time and effort and energy into things that turned out not to be, the thing that I'm doing now, other than that they were part of the journey that helped get me there. But I mean, I had some moments of some pretty deep frustration and some, soul searching and like, what am I doing? Am I cut out for this? Who makes these kinds of like who spends 6 months doing something that turns out to be absolutely nothing? Like all that self-talk we were talking about at the beginning. But I mean, have you found that that's been kind of your journey too?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah, it's oh man. We just continue to change. One of the things I was thinking of when you were saying that is when you actually go to set your goals or you're trying to line them up with your values is like if what I've learned is that if I'm going to be setting goals, I need to get really quiet. So for me, I have a really this relates back to like my daily habits, and one of them is meditation. And so if I'm going to set goals, I won't set goals unless I've done meditation. And for me, I do like a silent meditation for like 10 minutes. I'll even do like a guided meditation. The reason I bring this up is I don't set goals or make plans until I've done that, until I've tapped in and got quiet and listened to that inner voice, to listen to my intuition. Because I think that one of the most important things I've learned in recovery and in life is to follow and to listen to your intuition. And so that's where I've made a lot of bad choices, is kind of just listen to what other people told me I had to do and to kind of follow that path. And instead of getting really quiet and sitting with myself and listening to what is coming up. And so that's how I actually set goals now is I'll get really quiet. I actually will visualize as well to try to see like what is it that I really want, that align with my values, that align with my mission. And that has helped a lot. And I think that, to take into consideration a meditation practice, maybe that doesn't sound, it probably sounds maybe counterintuitive to people, but to get quiet and to hear what's going on in that inner voice, to be able to set goals, that's what's really helped me.
So when you meditate, then do you set and like do you have a specific process that you go through to get yourself while you're meditating or to get ready for meditating? Like do you set a specific intention, or like how does that work for you? Because the reason I'm asking is because I'm taking a meditation course right now because it's something I've struggled with. Not struggled is not the right word, but it's something I've been trying to figure out how I can incorporate my life in a way into my life in a way that serves me and is useful. So, I mean, when you're going into meditation, like, is it a ritual that you do every day, and how do you kind of set it up or think about it so, um, you get this clarity, I guess, over the goals or whatever the specific thing you want to have some insight on?
Yeah, it is a daily practice. So every day, every morning, I meditate. It's usually the first or second thing I do, besides brush my teeth and throw cold water on my face. The next thing is usually meditation. And yeah, my process has evolved. So it's like I said, we evolved. So I've been meditating every day for the last 3 years. And what I do now is I will, for 10 minutes, I use the app Insight Timer.
Oh, me too.
I love that app. It's a game changer. So I set the timer for 10 minutes, and I will get quiet, get comfortable, close my eyes, and for 10 minutes I will repeat. And this is something I learned from Juliana Ray, who has a practice called Unified Mindfulness. And I will say to myself 3 words: see, hear, and feel. And I will say this over and over again for 10 minutes. But when I say see, okay, when I say the see, I actually will see a vision of something. So I will say see, and I'll do that over and over and over for 10 minutes. And I'm just quiet, I'm breathing, my eyes are closed. So I'll do that for a 10-minute process. And during that process, towards the end of it, I will start to visualize my day. I literally, for the last 2 minutes, I will start to visualize my day. So I'll say to myself, see, see. And when I'm doing that, I'm actually visualizing the things I need to do in the day. And a lot of times I'm visualizing myself effortlessly doing those things. And so that's part of what I do every day. And then now I've also started doing a guided meditation that was given to me by a mentor. And so I do a guided meditation after that. So in other words, I get up early enough so that I have time to do this morning routine. I don't miss it. When I miss it, I notice definitely a change in my attitude and response to life in the day. So I don't want to feel that. So I want to feel good. So I do that every day. So yeah, so that's what my practice has evolved to, is a 10-minute silent meditation followed by a 5 to 9 minute guided meditation.
Wow, I love how many different takes there are on meditation, because this course I'm taking right now is really about. So this dude works with like Navy SEALs and stuff, but his point, uh, or thought behind, or theory, I guess, behind meditation is, it's a way of reality checking your the feelings, the sensations in your body, like the physiological responses in your body and your mind, the thoughts going through your mind with your current environment in the moment, right? So in other words, if I'm feeling, so we start this course and we do this meditation, it starts for 1 minute, and it's basically looking around the room at your immediate surroundings and saying, does the safety, like, does the sensations in my body match my surroundings? And it's really weird to think about it, because I'll be like sitting there and I'm like, well, I feel quite anxious right now. And I'm looking around me and my dog is basically in a coma because it's so relaxed, and the fireplace is going, and you know what I mean? I'm warm and there's no danger here whatsoever. Yet I still feel anxious. And I mean, as the course progresses, there's obviously, it gets deeper and starting to think through some of that stuff. But it's interesting how there's this disconnect between the present moment, what's the reality of the present moment, and what's going on in our bodies and minds. And as I explore that, I realize that, man, there's a huge opportunity. I really feel like for me, the huge opportunity is in doing what you're saying, right? Is kind of like looking inward and just becoming, I don't know, more in tune with my own. I guess it's going back to that story, becoming more in tune with my own stories I'm telling myself, and how to sort of intercept them, and just put them in the rightful place that they deserve in my life, which is interesting information and probably nothing more than that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you just reminded me of the stories that we have, the stories that play in our head, the stories that we believe of our own selves. And I just recently read something about treating your stories, like, let's say, the stories of your past, of things that have happened, and kind of, and I've literally just learned this, so bear with me, but to look at a story that happened in the past and talk about it in the third person as like a fairy tale, like. And so, and I tried it. I actually tried it with, because one of the stories that I tell myself is that, or I've told myself, not so much I believe it today as much, but it's, that I'm not lovable, or I am not capable of finding an intimate partner that's going to stay with me long term. And the reason why I have that belief is because when I was younger, I had a girlfriend who, on her birthday, I purchased her this necklace, and she broke up with me on her birthday. And I was like really young, 12 years old, but that stuck with me. That story stuck with me. So that even in adulthood, I had this story that I wasn't, that if I was going to be with someone I loved, they were going to leave me. It was going to cause pain. And so I read about this technique of going back and rewriting the story and saying it in a fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was this young man, and he dated this woman and gave her this golden necklace on his birthday, and yada yada. You get the idea. And so you kind of go through it like this is just a story, and this is not who I am today. And I found that it worked. Hopefully that made sense, but I that it made sense to go back and think of your stories that continue to come up today, even from childhood, and go back and just have a fairy tale, make it into a fairy tale, and then look at it from that perspective. That's not you. That's not who you are today. That it's not going to happen today. And so, yeah.
Yeah, those. I like the idea of trying different strategies to take ownership over some of that stuff, because I think there's a psychological principle I've learned about recently, and I love that we're talking about stuff that we've just learned, right? Because it's how we make. I mean, like we talk about an appreciative inquiry, like conversation is how you make meaning out of things, and that's actually what I want this podcast to be. Is just people having conversations where we can, even about stuff we just learned or may not even truly deeply understand yet, so we can just talk about it and try to figure it out. But I just recently read about this psychological, I don't know if you call it phenomenon or whatever, but called coherence. And it's how we look for, some sort of link between our inner world and our outer world. So for example, if you have one of the studies shows that so if you have a person who has low self-esteem, for example, just feels like shit about themselves, and they get promoted into a job where they have more responsibility, more money, a lot of those people at a statistically very significant level will leave those jobs because there's a lack of coherence between how they view themselves and what the external world is telling them. So I don't feel like I'm good enough, and I can't handle the fact that I'm in this job that's way too good for me. You know what I mean? So then they will leave. Or if you're the type of person who's, say, for example, thinking that I'm not lovable because of some event that happened to you, you will behave in a way that creates that coherence. And tell me if I'm assuming that belief that you're not lovable must have played itself out in relationships over and over again for you.
Absolutely. It happened probably 2 more times.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So it's interesting how, so really what it comes down to, when we love ourselves and we, like you said at the beginning, when we do the inner work, that's when everything changes, because the more we evolve as human beings, the more, for example, as I've changed as a person, I haven't changed anybody else other than myself. I've been focused on changing myself, but all of my relationships have gotten better, for example. So I think doing that inner work is super important. One thing I wanted to ask you about was when you were, still an addict or actively using, what was the thing that scared the shit out of you the most about quitting?
Wow. What scared me the most is how was I going to live without having a way to numb out the pain? I couldn't see a future without being able to somehow blot out pain. And the things that I had tried didn't work for blotting out pain. So using a substance, a drug, alcohol, that was a way so that I could numb out the pain. So I just couldn't see a future without having that substance. I actually remember at one point in my addiction saying, I'm going to be, 60 years old one day popping pills. And this is going to be how I'm going to be sitting on a porch and on my rocker, and that's what I'm going to be doing. And I remember seeing that vision, like I accepted my lot. And the reality was I wasn't even going to live to 60 the way I was going, but I just couldn't see a future that didn't involve having something to blot out pain and make me feel better. I couldn't see a future. It was too terrifying.
And did you know what, like, you'd obviously had some things happen to you that, some traumatic events happened to you, but did you understand what the pain was about, or did you just know that when you tried to be sober, it felt absolutely horrible? And the reason I ask is because I don't think I knew. Like, I knew that I had been through a traumatic event with my wife's illness and death, but I did not have any kind of conception about how that had impacted me. I just knew that, being sober sucked. And I didn't really know why it sucked, but so what level of awareness at that time did you have about what the pain was about or what those feelings were about?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize the extent of it. I didn't realize the extent of the pain. I didn't realize that my father leaving at 4 years old and never coming back and never talking to me again, except for 2 times for the next, 15, 16 years. I didn't know that those type of things were affecting and playing a role. I didn't know that when I was sophomore year, when I was bullied on the lacrosse team, that stuff was all buried in there. That was part of that pain. There's many other instances, and I wasn't aware of that stuff until I got into recovery and I started doing some work on myself to see that those things were just fueling the fire for my addiction. They were validating the story I had about myself, that I was a piece of shit, that what was happening was supposed to happen, that those experiences that I did remember happened because of I'm just not worth it. And it's a low place to get, but that's a place where, and I went deeper and darker than that, but that's where, so I wasn't really aware of exactly what the pain was, but I just had this notion that like enough has happened that, this is just the way it is. My father was an alcoholic and he died of this thing. So you know what, this is my path and I just need to accept it. And so that was about the awareness I had, but definitely being sober was not, I didn't like the way I felt. I didn't like feeling emotions and emotional pain and hurt that I had experienced in the past, which really a lot of this comes down to trauma that happened. And, that's what we're really finding out now, that trauma is a big reason why people, use a substance or get into addiction. So to really get back to that trauma and surface it and talk about it. I mean, for me, it was a huge breakthrough is doing that stuff, but I wasn't aware of that when I was in active addiction. I knew what had happened, but like, it was just kind of like a story that was like, yeah, this is just the way it is. My father was an alcoholic and he loved cocaine. And so this is my lot in life. And I just accepted that.
Yeah. It's amazing to hear you say that. The idea of being 60 years old and popping pills on your deck really just, it was like almost like a punch in the gut. Cause I can remember being, in the grips of drinking and having tried to quit a million times and failed obviously every time. And doing exactly that, telling myself like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I why do I continue to beat myself up about this? This is just who I am. And looking towards my future and just imagining everything I imagined in my future was me. And there was alcohol involved somehow, like having a beer, like mine, having a beer, by the ocean or whatever the thing is. But I just couldn't, I guess I don't know. I got at various points got tired of trying and thinking, you know what? I mean, okay, like nobody can fault me for a lack of effort in trying to quit, but I cannot do it. So I just need to accept that maybe a better path, maybe a path to a happier life is just accepting this is me, and that I've got a lot of great, wonderful characteristics, and I've got this fucking thing. And don't we all have a thing, and like, that's the stories I would tell myself. And I look and I believed it too, like, it's not like I was just telling myself something to make myself feel better. Like, I believed it in the moment, and I think that's an important thing to remember too, is like, yes, okay, I might have been deluded, but I mean, that was true to me at that time. And when I hear your story and, hear you talking and my own and other people's, it's like, wow, there's so, it doesn't have to be that way. It can be so much better. So, um, when you stop, like how long did it take for you when you finally stopped using, where you started to see a glimmer that life could be profoundly different? Like, so not just like, oh, this is better. I'm not having withdrawal symptoms anymore or whatever, but like that there was a light and that life could be really, really different.
Yeah, I mean, it was so abrupt the way it happened that even just just the way it happened right in the beginning, I had to make so many changes so fast that I think I started to see a little bit of hope early on in the first year of recovery because there was such an abrupt change. I had to change all my habits. Like literally, I had to change so many habits, and it had so many new habits that I started to see the change. But I would say where I really started to feel content or serenity or feel that I could feel confident to look the world in the eye and start to just really make changes is when number one, I found out I wasn't going to prison. That was so that was a little over a year in recovery. I found out I wasn't going to prison, and I know that I only had I had a lot to do with it in the sense that I moved my feet, but I knew that there was something higher than me. There's something greater than myself that was working in my life, and that feeling really brought a sense of like, wow, okay, I'm not alone anymore. I really thought I was, and so that was a big moment, and I think that's continued to happen where when I got into when I got back into school because I flunked out of school. I flunked out of school the first time, and going back into school just to kind of prove to myself I can do it, and then succeeding. And I think those little wins along the way is what told me like, wow, like I can do anything. Like I can do anything. And despite having, we didn't get in this much, but despite having federal felony, I was able to see that that's just a limited story. I'm telling myself I can still do the things I want to do. And when I started to achieve small wins along the way, I I started to realize like, wow, I can do anything. Like for instance, like when I bought my first home, okay, that was huge because at 4 we lost our home due to addiction, my father's addiction, and so I never lived in another house. We lived in apartments, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I never lived in another house. And when I bought my own home in recovery at 6 years in recovery, that was a huge milestone for me. Wow, I can do anything. I felt limitless. I like the word limitless because that's how I felt multiple times in my recovery. And those are the moments where it kept it going. But I think there was a lot of small wins even early on, even in the first year of recovery that made me feel, that way.
Yeah, interesting. Mine was, I think for me, it was the miracle morning. Like honestly, like so when I stopped drinking, but I wasn't really doing anything different in my life. So I was living the same life. I just wasn't waking up with a hangover, which was a huge step forward. And I mean, not doing all the stupid stuff that drunk people do, but really listening, starting the miracle morning, just randomly hearing it on a podcast. And I'll link to the book in the show notes page. I've recommended it to a million people. I know you've done it. You've read it too. And we both know Hal, the author, but it just was, I think for me, what it was what made me realize that how my mindset or my headspace influences how I see the world. That was the most profound thing. Like I noticed that as I started doing this morning ritual, that seemed completely weird to me at the beginning, like visualization and meditation and affirmations. And I was like, okay, like this, I mean, I'm going to try it. I committed to trying it for 30 days, but I'm not going to lie. I was a massive skeptic. And so even that a skeptic could see the results so quickly is quite a testament to the power of having a morning ritual and just starting your day with intention. But what I noticed was I just started feeling better about stuff. Like I felt like I had started my day in a good way, and it wasn't down to one specific thing. Oh, I visualized this or I affirmed that. It was more like I felt like I did something good for myself. And when I went to work, I noticed that I was interacting with people in a different way because I felt like I had started the day well. And then I started talking to people about the Miracle Morning, like, oh my God, you might want to try this too. And people looking at me like I had three heads. So, but yeah, for me, that's what it was. But for the time previous to that, it was more like, I'm basically the exact same person that I'm not drinking. So I think what you're saying is true, is that, and super important, is that those that investment of time, money, and energy into your own personal growth, whether you're an addict in recovery or dealing with mental health issues or just a regular old person living a regular old life. I mean, it's that you got to do that if you want to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And to just talk about the Miracle Morning for a moment, and although just to plug the Miracle Morning for addiction recovery is going to be coming out the end of June. So really excited about
Are you
that
writing
book.
that?
Way. No, I didn't write it, but Joe Polish, Anna David, Hal
Oh, okay.
Elrod,
Okay.
the honorary recorder, they wrote the book. So I'm really excited that's going to be coming out next month, and I'm a huge proponent of that book. But the so the just to touch on that, what that book helped me to do is like yourself, because you're right. When you said something, when I started doing the Miracle Morning, it was about 3 years ago. I started to realize that I could take control of my life by taking control of my morning. And I never, that the concept was just never there before. And I was doing habits that were already in the Miracle Morning. I've been doing a lot of those habits, but to be able to chunk them together and to do them in the morning, and some you could do throughout the day, but having that morning routine, all of a sudden I felt a new sense of control over the life I wanted to create. And I had never felt that in recovery as like I did when I started doing the Miracle Morning. And, I it's amazing. It's amazing what has happened since then. And a lot of the progress that I've made into where I am today is a result of practicing those habits every single morning and then throughout my day for the Miracle Morning. And it's amazing.
Yeah. And then you take that, right? You take that, you take your personal growth, you take, constantly learning, trying new things, discovering new passions, meeting new people, ending up at the L.E.A.F certification, and then looping that back and bringing new insights and information and ideas and practices into the recovery model. Like, I mean, if that's not like a virtuous circle, man, I don't know what is. That's incredible when you think about it.
Yeah, it's on so many levels. We can go real deep on that, because that is exactly right. It's like, how does this book that I found on Business Insider when I was just scrolling mindlessly, Miracle Morning book just shows up on this website, and I buy it and I don't read it for 3 months, and then all of a sudden I read it and I read the whole thing in like 2 days, and then next thing you know, I'm just like on this mission, and it's amazing. You just never know where life's going to take you. So buy the book, read the book, do the practices, and see where it takes you. And it's inspired me in so many ways. I mean, the business I'm in today, and me writing my first my book now that I'm writing, and the things I'm doing, it's all inspired by those, just taking action of buying a book like the Miracle Morning.
Yeah, I love it. It's like the compounding, all these stuff, all these tweaks and books you read, they have a compounding effect on one another. And it's like all of a sudden, after maybe it's a year, maybe it's different for every person, but all of a sudden you step back and you turn around and you see how far you've come, and it's like, holy crap! I never realized this was possible, and I want to make sure that other people realize this is possible. So, you talked about some of the things that you're doing right now, which I definitely want to take some time and touch on because they're super important. So, you said you're writing a book, and you also talked about entrepreneurs in recovery. So, can you tell us more about those?
Yeah. I'll talk first about Entrepreneurs in Recovery. So Entrepreneurs in Recovery is something that occurred to me last year. I was surrounding myself with entrepreneurs and people who are thinking bigger, and I started to ask myself this question, like, why can't I do this? I work so hard at the job I work at now for someone else. Could I do this and work this hard for myself? And so I didn't know what that meant, that question, but in time, I started to, this idea of Entrepreneurs in Recovery came to me, where it's like, well, I want to learn about people who are struggled with addiction and now they're entrepreneurs that are successful. I want to know how they did it. So the idea of Entrepreneurs in Recovery came together, and I started to piece what that would look like. And really, the mission is to elevate the lives of people in recovery who might be stuck, lost, or lack direction, to help them gain clarity, to create a vision, and to live a life on purpose. So that's the mission behind it. And the way I do that is right now, and it's something that it's growing, like it's growing into something. And right now, what I do is I offer life coaching. So I coach certain men in recovery who are just looking to reach their full potential. They're looking for more. They feel stuck. They want more. They know there's more. They didn't get clean and sober just to be average, right? They wanted to they want more. So part of that is life coaching and offering that. And then what I'm doing with appreciative inquiry and facilitation at treatment centers, because I want to kind of expand that much, much greater. If it is going to work, then I want to share that with the world. And so that's part of it. And there's other aspects like collaboration with people who are, again, entrepreneurs in recovery now. And that could be through a future podcast that I'm thinking of. And, and then speaking, part of that is speaking, and the speaking part of it is to smash the stigma. There's such a, mental health has a stigma, addiction, recovery has such a big stigma. So getting out there and showing like there's people like me and all my closest friends are in long-term recovery, and they're living lives that I'd have to get them on this podcast to tell you about them. They're amazing. And so that's what I want to share through Entrepreneurs in Recovery is that mission. So I think that might have touched on, Entrepreneurs in Recovery. And then the book is something that came out of, it was actually, a lot of it was motivated by or inspired by the Miracle Morning, and especially the addiction recovery version that's coming out. And so it's a book of like my story mixed in with the habits, all of the habits that I started using from day one, literally the first week of recovery, all the way to 12 years later. What were all the habits that I used? And I packaged them together in an acronym called FEARS. And I believe fear is a big part of addiction. And you could actually be addicted to fear. That's why it's an addiction. But, so the book is, it's in its works. I'm writing it, and just let it create itself.
I love it. So how you find the process of writing a book? I found it to be quite the emotional roller coaster, but what was interesting about it was how it dispelled a notion that I had to be an expert on a subject before I wrote a book. I think that's just another bullshit story we tell ourselves, that hold us back. Because what I realized is, if you want to become highly knowledgeable about something, spend like 4 or 5 months, like thinking, researching and writing about it all the time. And boy, by the time you're done writing the book, you're going to have a serious command of the subject matter.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's funny. It is. I battle that story. That story for some reason shows up almost every time before I write. Almost every time before I write, it's like, who am I to write the book? Who am I to talk about these subjects? The subjects and the habits that I practiced for almost a decade, my brain will still tell me, who are you to write about this stuff? And it's just so funny because my brain will say, well, you're not an author. You're not a writer. And it's like, well, that's not true. I wrote like this mini book on cold showers, which I had never actually released, but maybe I will soon. But the actual book about addiction recovery and these habits, like, again, your brain tells you. So you have to find accountability, I found, with the writing habit. And, I wrote my first small book with an 8-minute writing habit. So I just promised myself that I would write for 8 minutes a day, no matter what. And I did it for 3 months. And 3 months later, I had a small little ebook. And so it worked. So for this book is, a much bigger book. It's about holding myself accountable, but telling people that I'm writing it. That's why I told you. That's why I'm sharing it, so that I actually write this book. I believe everyone needs to write a book. I really do. I think everyone has powerful stories and examples to share with the world. And if I don't write this book, it's going to be one of my biggest regrets. So it's getting written, but developing a daily habit, getting some accountability with people is key.
Yeah, for sure. And just as we wrap up here, you mentioned cold shower. So you and I cannot be friends. Okay. I can't stand, I've tried to take a cold shower so many times. We have sometimes in our mastermind groups, some idiot will suggest that we have like some kind of cold shower contest. I just cannot make myself do it. I can't do it. So I don't know.
Awesome. copy of my book that I haven't released yet, so that you can get some inspiration.
All
Black
right.
showers every day for 2.5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Is this something that you're still doing?
Yeah, I do it every day for the last since December of 2015.
Well, there you go. You have your first customer for your ebook. There you go. I bet you didn't see that happening. I bet I didn't think we'd be talking about cold showers when we started this conversation.
Snuck it in there.
Yeah, that's right, man. Okay, cool. So listen, hey, thanks for coming on the show, man. So for people that want to find out more about you, and I want to say to the audience, like, Jesse is an incredible guy. And we didn't get too deeply into his backstory, but I mean, it's an incredible backstory too. So if you want to send me a bio, man, I'll make sure to include it in the show notes page. But yeah, you're an incredible guy doing incredible work. And, just seeing the video of the guys at the recovery center where you were doing the appreciative inquiry exercise and sort of the comments they had and how life transforming that was for them was so inspirational, because it's one of those things where you see this, it just drives home the message that there are infinite ways that every single one of us can make a contribution to the world. And it really just takes getting over that fear and getting out there and doing something, and that you committed to doing that, which is, makes you an inspiration in my book for sure. So for people who would like to find out more about you and the work you're doing in entrepreneurs in recovery, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can go to entrepreneursinrecovery.com, or they can go to my name, jesseharless.com. And they can find me also on Facebook, Entrepreneurs in Recovery. Yeah, it's the best way to find me.
Awesome, brother. Well, hey, thanks for being a guest on the show. And I'm sure we'll keep talking. And I wish you all the best, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And another great conversation with a great person. And remember that as we close out the show, just remember that emotional excellence is not a destination, okay? It's a journey. It is continually trying to bring intention and purpose to making values-aligned choices. It's experiencing the full range of human emotions that we all are part of, all of us, and trying like hell to learn from them, observe them, learn from them, and move through them. And it's not always easy, man. I fucked this up too. Like, I've had a few days recently where I was all wrapped up in my emotions and beating myself up and feeling a ton of anxiety. But you know what? That's life, man. And I'm trying to learn and I'm trying to get better. And that's what this is about. So I'm no expert, not by any stretch. The reason I'm doing this podcast is the same reason I started the Mental Health Warriors podcast, is because I want to learn. I'm a student, right? I'm a lifelong student. And I hope you see yourself in the same way. Or if you don't, that you start to think about how you might choose to look at yourself and look at life in a different way, because that's why we're all here. It's not about being perfect. It's not about having mastered everything. It's about trying. It's about just continually trying. And that's what I hope to help you with on the show, because I'm certainly fucking helping myself. And if I can manage to do both of those things, then that is what this is all about. So thanks again, Jesse, for the amazing conversation, brother. I really, really am happy to know you and call you a new friend. And as I said at the intro, I hope to see you in October. And I wish you well, everybody, you beautiful motherfuckers. Thanks for listening to the Emotionally Excellent Man Show. Now, go own your shit like the powerful, handsome boss man that you are.